It is Wednesday the 7th of the 5th, 2025, and it is chaos out here in these F1 streets as far as all the centric threads, F1 centric threads at which we need to pull. There's Briatore, there's Colapinto, he's been appointed, now gets himself a stay of execution of his own, just like Jack Doohan before him. He has 5 races to prove himself, otherwise he's gonzo. But those aren't the proper news headlines that we got to talk about. There is a brewing story in the weird and wacky world that is F1 around cheating McLaren. Where has this advantage come from? Only a couple of months ago they were drop dead last, and now there is flexi wing, now there is mini DRS, and now there is tyre cooling. You saw Zach Brown poking fun at the other 9 teams on the grid with his tyre water bottle. Why are McLaren so fast? Well, it's at the altar of a couple different things. Of course, aerodynamic efficiency, but of course their ability to get those tyres in the optimal temperature window, heat them therefore, and then keep them there. This is a two-way thing now that we're seeing at McLaren. And again, in qualifying, you'll have yourself a genius Max Verstappen lap where he can keep with and or beat McLaren. Please see as your exhibit A, Suzuka, Saudi Arabia as your exhibit B. But then when we get to the race, these McLarens, these papaya coloured cars are a gazillion miles down the track, dunking on Maximilian Verstappen 4, soon to be 5 times, some say, to the tune of 0.9 seconds a lap. This is uncanny. This needs some explaining. And you know what? I've got to put some respect on this YouTube channel's name. Shout out to B Sport. So we're going to go through some clips because I think it's important at this stage. Nobody understands. Red Bull, Christian Horner are getting out their bloody thermal imagery with a view to try and understand what McLaren are doing. But the F1 internet stays undefeated each and every single time. Legendary channel B Sport has put out a video explaining it again for context. This dude used to work at McLaren and use the technology that he's about to explain to us B-spec noddy F1 minds. Let's roll the first clip and we'll talk about it as this dude explains context.
So teams want to have tires in their operating window as quickly as possible. That means they need to heat them. And here F1 teams are very similar. Mercedes and Red Bull can heat up the tires as quickly as McLaren and hence can be competitive in qualifying for one lap. But McLaren's advantage is that tires are later not getting too hot, and we can even see this during quali in the final sectors at different tracks. So teams want to have tires in their operating window as quickly as possible. That means they need to heat them. And here F1 teams are very similar. Mercedes and Red Bull can heat up the tires as quickly as McLaren and hence can be competitive in qualifying for one lap. But McLaren's advantage is that tires are later not getting too hot, and we can even see this during quali in the final sectors at different tracks. So teams...
Thoughts on the battle with Verstappen today?
Copy and agreed. All of their advantage, or at least 90% of it as far as McLaren are concerned, is born out of their ability to mitigate, minimise for tyre deg. It was the same last year in 2024, right? You'll recall that Max Verstappen and Lando, every time they would jump off, every time they would get a green light, Max Verstappen would be quicker, but then towards the end of the stint, McLarens would do one of these, converge upon Maximilian Verstappen and the Red Bull. In 2025, it's no different. Indeed, McLaren have seen the rest of the teams that and raised them this. The extent of their advantage has done one of these, chat, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is why it gets chaotic and needs some explaining by a dude, an engineer who used to work for McLaren. Put some respect on B Sport's name on YouTube. I will link this video in the description. Roll the next clip.
At each corner we have a brake and a drum cover. The brake needs cool air and is heating up this air. The drum, which is the closest surface to the rim, could get warm first to bring the tires up to temperature and stay cool later to avoid further heating up of the rims and hence the tires. So usually these two paths within the wheel assembly are separate. But what if we combine these now? So we use the hot air coming from the brakes to heat up the drums and hence the rims and tires. If the tires reach the perfect temperature, we reverse this process. So cool air goes through the drums first and then hits the brakes. The brakes are so hot that a slightly higher inlet temperature doesn't change the temperature difference and hence cooling performance by much. So how can a system look like which can reverse the airflow in an easy way? For example, like this. We use a system with 2 inlets and 1 outlet and 2 bimetallic strips between them. First, air flows through the brakes and heats up the drum. Later, when the drum is hot, we can reverse the process and cool the drum first and then the brakes. It would be a simple system within the wheel assembly, hard to see for anyone and does not need water.
What are we doing here, chap? I understand none of this. All I will say is this, that context is key in this Buchanan sport, I want to say. Correct me if I'm wrong, chap. But this chap knows what he's talking about. He used to work for McLaren back in the day. And as you'll see shortly, he used to leverage this sort of technology. And again, he prefaces everything he's about to say with this. It is speculation and conjecture. But again, if we're doing the apophthegm and trying to connect the dots with a view to explain the root cause and the derivation of McLaren's doable competitive over the rest of the field, then this, I would contend, is as good an explanation of any. Pay attention, the FIA. Roll the next clip.
The problem with this is just that these bimetallic strips have to be driven by the drum's temperature, so need to be fixed there. And on the other hand, also other teams are keeping hot brake air separate and have a cool layer between brakes and drum, but their tires still overheat. So like Red Bull says, it's hard to get such cooling performance only with air. But now there's a different technology coming into play. And these are phase-changing materials. So when materials change, for example, from solid state to liquid, they need huge amounts of energy for that. And during the process, the temperature stays constant, although it's absorbing a lot of heat. And here, the person who currently speaks to you can tell you a few things more about that, because a while ago, I wrote my thesis at McLaren in Woking about the use of phase-changing materials in motorsports. Back in the day, it was about the cooling of high-voltage batteries. You want to bring them up to their optimal temperature as quickly as possible and then keep them there. So exactly the same requirements as for the tires now.
Interesting, chap. This dude is talking about using phase-changing materials to get and keep those tyres in the optimal temperature window. I feel like Red Bull, Christian Horner, Pierre Vacher, Enrico Balbo need to watch this dude's video, subscribe to B Sport and give him all the super chats. I feel like he's done all of their hard work for them. And again, context is always key in these circumstances. If this were any Tom, Dick or Harry, if this were Cameron CC trotting this out, then probably treat this with kid gloves. But this dude said that he used to work for McLaren, that he's developed this innovative technology, this god tier level F1 thinking. Roll the last clip, Cameron.
So a good idea would be to include phase-changing materials in the drum covers to regulate their surface temperature. If the covers get too much heat, the material starts its transition and keeps the optimal temperature, while competitors' drums are getting too hot and overcook the tires. So, like we said before, the outside shape of the drums is regulated, the inner shape is not. If the drum covers are off, McLaren doesn't care to hide the assembly because it looks like any other team's design. But if they put the assembly together, mechanics build a wall so no one can see anything. The system is completely passive, doesn't need an actuator or electricity, and who looks inside a drum cover? And because the inside design and material is free, the system is legal. This is just a suggestion, but let me know what you think about such a system and if we should take it.
So look, B Sport out here doing the good Lord's work as far as the F1 gods are concerned. Let me say this for the avoidance of that. Okay, so it's speculation and conjecture, potentially, but this news story and narrative is only going to do one of these. You will be hearing more and more about it between now and race 9, where they institute for the tighter parameters around flexi-wing, 15 millimeters on the outboard becomes 13 millimeters, 5 on the inboard portion of the front wing becomes 3, if I recall correctly. The FIA, as far as their remit, as part of their scope, needs to level the competitive landscape. Why? Because everybody will turn off their TVs. If this is monotony McLaren and Oscar Piastri versus Lando Norris championship, I would argue that attention dollars will come out of the sport. That's why it's so important, though fundamental, that Christian Horner et al., FIA, Mohammed Ben Salam get their arms around this. The boys and girls over at the Bulls that are red have been begging for a tighter load test, for more scrutiny as far as what McLaren are doing with their tyres, minimising for tyre deg towards the latter stages of the race. How, Sway? How are they doing it? Well, I feel like B Sport, link will be in the description. Go and support that chap doing the God tier market leading purple sector work and explaining this. Now I will bookend my soliloquy talking extemporaneously with this, because this is important. It's conjecture, of course it's speculation. How do we know that this chap is on the money? Well, context is key. Tenure is also important. If what he's saying is true, and once upon a time he worked with McLaren and leveraged phase changing materials, what are we talking about? What are we on about? Who am I to doubt that chap? And secondarily, this is really important as well. You heard him talk about when the brake duct is fully constructed, they would need to circle the wagons around it. That's when all their secrets would be revealed. You will recall on the final day of testing at Bahrain, it got techie, didn't it? You remember Lando Norris came out and did a super quick hot lap, and when he got back to the pits, what did McLaren do? Human wall around the car again. Correlation, full stop, causation. The former does not imply the latter. But I think we got to take this thing seriously. You're a legend. Red Bull are aware of the phase changing materials. How else do you think Horner escaped all those allegations? Well, what I don't think they're aware of is how to apply it in this circumstance. I just understood the joke. It's going to get techier than techie things over the course of the next weeks. It would not surprise me if Red Bull come out with something similar and all of a sudden Maximilian Verstappen's RB21 minimises for its tyre deg to the same or similar extent that the MCL39 has been doing, particularly at the altar of the legend of F1 YouTube, that is B Sport. Go and subscribe to that dude. The link to the full video will be in the description. For now, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.